One of my favorite fights from this past weekend at the UFC was the women's strawweight bout on the main card. We saw Felice Herrig go out there and dominate a very game and very tough Justine Kish. So we welcome into the show today one of my favorite people, Felice Herrig. Felice, welcome back to the show, and of course, congratulations on an amazing victory.
Thank you. Yeah, it was, oh my gosh. I knew it was going to be a tough fight, and it was. Like, it's, people look at the rankings and they're like, she's ranked number 15 or so, it's not going to be a tough fight. And I'm like thinking like, gosh, she's like one of the only girls in the strawweight division I was like legit scared of. I did not want to fight Justine.
Well, Justine, that's the thing a lot of people don't remember, is because I remember when they casted the season of The Ultimate Fighter, because I remember talking to you about that. Justine, in my opinion, was one of the dark horses. Like a lot of people before other people kind of made their waves, Justine was kind of one of those people that people felt like she could make real waves in that show, and unfortunately she got injured. But she was very legit.
Oh, 100%. I don't know if I had told you in prior interviews that I didn't really want to fight her, mostly because, her size. She's so big. She cuts so much weight. And when I was on The Ultimate Fighter with her, she was walking around like 150 pounds. She would not have made weight. Like, even if she got the chance to fight, she wouldn't have made weight because she was just too big. But she's also, notorious for not making weight. That was something I was afraid that she was going to put me in a position, she was going to not make weight, and I was going to be put in a position to be like, okay, well, I showed up to fight, but she's heavy, she's already a big girl, and she missed weight. Like, what do I do? Do I just collect my show purse and go home, or do I fight her but give up size? And I don't know. Like, she was, I guess people don't, they can't feel what I felt in there. Everybody's, saying it was such a dominating performance. And if you look at the scorecards, if you watch the fight, it was. But I was in there, and it was physically very hard. I had to be on point, like, the whole time.
Yeah. Well, and when I say dominant, and I say that as a compliment because I know how good Justine is and how scrappy she is also. Like, she's one of those fighters who, even when it's a close fight, like, she just has a way of finding a way to win. And for you to really dominate the striking, the grappling, like doing the things you did, that's what was most impressive to me, is because, she fought her way out. I mean, we talked about that rear naked choke she fought her way out of, which was just insane. But I mean, I thought in every facet of the fight you won, and I thought that was very impressive, because usually you'll see, maybe she had a little bit of a grappling exchange, or maybe she had a little bit of a striking exchange, but I thought you pretty much, beat her everywhere, and I thought that was the most impressive part about that fight.
I keep telling people not to count me out, that I'm a well-rounded MMA fighter. I'm not just a striker. I'm not just a grappler. I've really learned over the past few years to be able to mix things up and to be able to, do things on the fly. And I think, I'm just, like I said, I'm a very well-rounded MMA fighter.
Yeah. We've talked, obviously numerous times before and after all your fights, but especially over these last few. And it's funny because I went back and, reread one of the stories I did on you when you were, dealing with your body issues, and you kind of came out on the other side of that before the fight, when you first came back and beat Kylan Curran. And the improvements that you've made over these last few fights really have been amazing. I mean, the growth, and because, a lot of times, and I think this, Felice, a lot of fighters, when they get to a certain level, a certain veteran kind of level, it's tougher to change. It's tougher to adapt and make make differences, become a better fighter. And I feel like it's kind of scary how good you've been over these last few fights, how not only how well you're winning, but also we're seeing new wrinkles in the game. And let's be honest, there's a lot of people who don't do that at this stage in the game.
Yeah, and I think that's why veterans are used as, remember I said when I fought Alexa Grasso, I said, I'm nobody's stepping stone. And I felt that I was being used as a stepping stone because a lot of veterans, I mean, look, you see what happened to BJ Penn, like this last weekend, like he lost again, and that happens as fighters too. Sometimes we get to that certain age, at certain point where we're just done and we're not, getting better. But nobody knows me. Nobody knows my story. Nobody knows how hard I work and how hard I want it and how badly I've always just wanted to be the best fighter I can be. I am never satisfied. I'm not, I wasn't, if I was satisfied, I would have years ago. I just never would have gotten good at grappling. I came in as a world champion kickboxer into MMA with zero grappling experience, and I knew that I'm going to work so hard that I would just make it to the top, and I would be great at that aspect of the game too. And it's hard to start over, and it's hard to it's hard to work on your weaknesses, and it is hard to keep evolving. But I'm obsessive. I'm a little bulldog.
Well, here's the thing, and because you've had big wins in your career before, so this isn't necessarily new to you or anything, but have you, when you go back and watch the fights, or when you kind of see, kind of look, kind of from the outside looking in at your performances, I mean, do you see the big differences? I mean, because again, you've won big fights. It's not like this is the first time you've ever done it, but it just feels like you've turned a corner in a way. Like these last 3 fights have really and now you're not Felice Herrig, the potential top 10 fighter. You're Felice Herrig, the potential title contender. And I think that's a different level. I mean, let's just be honest.
Yeah. And it just goes to show, how hard I work and how bad I want it and how much I don't give up when things get tough. I have evolved a lot, and, a lot of it is a contribution to my, over the years of all the fighting. I had a lot of chemical imbalances. I had a lot of eating disorders. I didn't eat right during camp. I didn't eat right after weigh-ins, the weight cut. I blame a lot of it on, I could have evolved so much quicker if I just, I don't know. I think I got older and I got more mature and I saw the sport differently. And I started training for fun, and I didn't rely, I think years ago I was kind of like a Justine Kish. Not to, I'm just using her as an example, but she's brute strength, raw power, but she hasn't really learned how to use it because she relies on it. She relies on the fact that she can just she gets away with it in a lot of her fights, but it's never forced her, to get better at her skills, or maybe never made her want to get better at, her skills, and I don't know, I just have always had I've always known the athlete that I am, and I've always had really high expectations for myself, and I just am at the gym all the time. This is my life, and I keep getting better and better, and it's showing. And I took some steps back, and I'm just a little bit more calm and relaxed and happy. I'm happy. I'm happy that I'm not all about the weight cut anymore. And for years, for a long time, it was all about the weight cut for me.
Yeah. Before I ask anything else, I always got to ask the hard-hitting questions, Felice, and I know you always answer those hard-hitting questions, so let me hit you with this one. There was a little incident in the Octagon on Sunday night, and I think you know what I'm talking about. Let's just say it had something to do with the UPS slogan, "What can Brown do for you?" Were you aware, and I guess the best question I can ask is, what was your reaction before and after that? Because I don't want to get too personal for Justine, but at least she acknowledged it. She understood. I mean, I can't even imagine that situation, to be honest.
Yeah, it's hard to talk about because here, but I get asked it in every interview, and I don't want to put Justine on the spot, and I don't want to, embarrass her any more than she's probably already embarrassed. But, in the fight, I didn't really recognize it probably till the last 10 seconds. And then I knew what happened after the bell rang, and I looked down at my foot and at the canvas and realized that was what I was smelling.
Yeah.
And, like I said, it's hard to talk about it, but it's hard to not talk about it. And it's not a big secret. It's not like something other people don't already know.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to sit here and bash her or humiliate her or make fun of her because I don't think that's right. But I was aware, but not like during the fight. And even if it's kind of one of those things too, like during the fight, your adrenaline's, like they say, like your adrenaline's going, and if you get hurt, you don't feel it. It's the same. It wouldn't have mattered, It wouldn't have made a difference. Like if I knew sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Years from now, when you write a book, Felice, when the career is over and you've done all you're ever going to do and you're writing your book, at least admit this, that'll be an interesting chapter to add to the biography. Be honest, because I know it will be.
It will be. You mean when somebody writes my book for me? Let's be honest, that's the way it really works these days.
That's funny. So now, you go through and you had a tremendous victory, and it was, like I said, it was a very dominant performance, and I tweeted out on Sunday night, and I commend Justine Kish for the toughness she showed in that fight, getting out of the rear naked choke, the thing she did. But I also, I pointed it out, and I said this, and I'm not saying this just because I'm talking to you, but I said, let's pay some credit to Felice Herrig for the wins you've had, these 3 last wins. I mean, taking out a number 1 prospect in Alexa Grasso, taking out another undefeated fighter in Justine Kish, and obviously the super lightning quick submission over Kylan Kerr. And I think you really have turned the corner. And I know you addressed this in the post-fight press conference, and we'll get more into this in a second, but when the fight's over and you start reading the comments and you start seeing some of the things they're saying online, like, it's not my job to, for you to believe or not believe what people are saying, but did you notice that at all? Because I did. It felt like people were paying credit to her for being tough, and I admit she's incredibly tough, but it just felt like you weren't getting enough credit for the performance you had. Did you feel any of that afterwards?
I actually didn't, because I was actually getting a lot of praise, and I heard so many people just, when people are talking about how I'm close to a title fight, obviously I am getting the praise. The one thing that bothers me a little bit is it's not the toughness. It's people talk about how physically strong Justine is and how very few strawweights would be able to physically handle her. And I'm like, well, she's strong, but obviously, like, I didn't just beat her on technique. So many girls who had good technique would not beat Justine. I feel like I should get a little bit of credit for being physically strong as well, because look at what I did to her, the physically strong person. She wasn't holding me down, Yeah. So that's one thing, is just that it's, come on. I'm clearly a strong girl too.
Yeah. Yeah. So now, let's talk about the press conference, because you talked about the way you've been promoted, or let's just say maybe the lack of the way you've been promoted recently. And I know, it was a little bit of an emotional time, and I understand it. And I think you've really connected with people because of your honesty in that moment. Now that you've had a couple days removed from that, kind of walk me through how you're feeling and how has the last few days been, since you've been so brutally honest. Because I think one of the things, myself as a journalist and people that watch the sport, they appreciate that kind of honesty from fighters when they really open up. Because, you hear the cliched responses and, the kind of things you're supposed to say, quote unquote, as a fighter. But it felt like that was a really honest moment. And I have to imagine you've kind of felt that, in the aftermath.
Yeah, well, I didn't really expect my words. I think that went viral. I mean, because everybody's contacting me for interviews and wanting to talk about it, and I'm getting a lot of support from it, but those weren't my intentions. When they ask you in an interview, where do you think this puts you, and you legit have no answer, because you can't look at there's been no fairness in the way things are run. And there's no clear-cut, way to the title. Look at how many fights it took Max Holloway to actually get to the title. And I want to be clear, too, that I was speaking on my frustration, but also, I felt so many other UFC fighters are just as frustrated. And I was, speaking on, behalf of everyone as well. But, it's hard, because I thought that maybe the reason why I wasn't getting promoted or any love at all from the UFC was because I took time off. And I was like, yeah, it sucks, but I'm going to come back and I'm going to win, and I'm going to win great, and, things are going to turn around. But nothing has turned around. I mean, look that fight with Justine Kish, well, okay, so they put it on the main card. They put it in a prime spot, but it got, okay, so we're not on the poster. We're not, there was zero promotion for that fight whatsoever. Not even a little Instagram video of, like, of what the UFC, normally does. And it makes me sad because everybody who knows the sport pretty much knew that was probably going to be a pretty good fight. And I feel like, because it wasn't a quote-unquote hot girl fight, it got no love at all. When I fought Alexa Grasso, it was promoted heavily, but I wasn't. Alexa Grasso was. I was the person she was supposed to beat. And that was very apparent. Marketing says a whole lot. It's not like we're not stupid people. I'm not a stupid person. It's not like I don't realize that, hey, Alexa Grasso is getting flown out here, there, getting all this special treatment, the next big thing. Felice Herrig has no chance of winning, she's doing all this mainstream stuff. And I got, I wasn't asked to do anything by, UFC. Yeah. And I've shied away from media. I try to focus on the fight, but it's also like, even in between fights, even, after I beat Alexa, I live in Chicago. We're so diehard on our sports teams. Last year, the Cubs won the World Series. A few years before that, the Blackhawks won the Stanley Cup. We have the Chicago Bulls. We have the Chicago Bears. We're, very, Chicago's a city, proud of their sports teams. And I reached out to Dana asking, if I could go, to some sporting events. I said I would love to go to some sporting events. I would love to be put out there. And I got nothing. I was told that, he was working on it, but did anything ever come to play? No. I didn't even get invited to International Fight Week, And the sad thing is, look at how I am with my fans, Damon. You know it. You see it. There's a reason that I've had the same sponsors for 7 years. And they can't even put their logo on me in the Octagon. It's because I'm good with fans. I'm good at interacting. I'm good at, with my sponsors. And the UFC has never gotten a chance to see it because they've never given me the opportunity. They've never given me a little bit of a push. And I'm not just talking about just me. Instead of just focusing on a select handful of fighters, why can't they spread the love? It took a lot of fighters to build this division. I mean, to build the UFC, to build this sport. That's why people love this sport. They don't love this sport just because of Conor McGregor. There's a lot of fighters who deserve a lot of love, and there's a reason why everybody's going to Bellator. It's because fighters are unhappy.
This is a tough question, Felice, and I promise this is not like a gotcha question to get you to give me an inflammatory answer, but because listen, we're talking about a very specific division here right now, and I know when you say the hot girl fights, quote unquote, I know exactly what you're talking about. I think most people do. Do you believe in your mind in any way, shape, or form that some of the promotion around the women's division there's an air of sexism in a way? And what I mean by sexism isn't men versus women necessarily, but the more attractive, you know what I mean? Does that make sense what I'm saying? I know that's a very tough subject, yeah. But do you feel like any of that plays a part?
Absolutely. Even it's that, I remember, I've been in the sport for a long time, and I've seen so many fighters, and it's sad to see that sometimes girl fights get put on the main card above Eddie Wineland, Takeya Mizugaki. I remember when that fight was on a prelim. I fought on the Chicago card with Eddie Wineland, and he had this amazing knockout, and then his next fight to get put on the prelims, and meanwhile they put girls on the main card, and I'm all for women, in the sport, obviously, but I don't think that the women should be marketed or put above, on a spot above, males just because, they're females. You still have to, go with protocol, who's a great fighter. And, of course there's sexism. There's, people still think that, certain fighters in the division are way better than they are, and it's because of how they're marketed and how they're promoted and how they're given all this like mainstream exposure. Meanwhile, you have people just climbing the ranks and winning fights, and it shouldn't be. There could be a good mix, because everybody is arguing that, oh, well, you've used your sexuality and your looks for years. It's not about using that, but you have to be able to back it up. And it's not the sole. That's not why I got into MMA. I fight because I love to fight. So when you're completely telling people like, hey, you don't even have to be a good fighter, you just have to be good looking, and you're going to get all this love, it's a slap in the face to the people who are really here, like, busting their ass, like, doing things and trying to become a better fighter, and not just trying to, look good and on social media and getting rewarded for not putting anything into the sport. Like, this is a sport. That should come first. Fighting should be number one. The marketing should be marketing the fighters who deserve to be marketed, no matter how they choose to market. Oh, this person's funny, this person's pretty, this person, this person's a little, like, weird, like, oh, this person has this weird, talent, like, let's play off of that a little bit. But it should all be it should be because the fighter can fight, not solely because they're attractive.
Yeah. Yeah. What is, in your mind, Felice, is there a way for the UFC to fix this? Because I think a lot of times in these situations, the way that it becomes relevant is because people do speak up and they let their voices be heard. Now, we know situations where it has fixed it. We've also known other ones where it hasn't fixed it. So in your mind, what do you think, do you think there's a way for them to kind of repair this breach a little bit of what they've kind of created with you over these last few fights?
I mean, absolutely. And like I said, not just with me, but there's, the UFC got bought out by a huge, by the people from the entourage. They've got a team behind them, like Hollywood. They have people behind them. They just need to stop putting all their eggs in one basket, and they can, take a look at the fighters and get to know the fighters, learn the fighters, see how they can do your job, see how you can properly market, like, different people to different demographics, because every fighter is going to appeal to, like, different demographics, and I think that they should be able to use that. And of course it's repairable. Will it be repaired? I mean, I'm hoping that it was just, with the transition and the buyout, maybe some things slipped under the cracks. I mean, it'd be hard for them to not realize that they're putting all this stock into a select few fighters. Meanwhile, they have so many on their roster that are having 3-4 shows a week, Yeah, I mean, I really don't know where this puts me. I feel like, me standing up and being vocal, not just for myself, but on behalf of, many of the fighters, I could be punished for it. Maybe I will get cut from the UFC. I don't know. I'm hoping not. I'm on a 3-fight win streak, but maybe, I'll get punished. Maybe I'm going to get bumped, to the prelims now.
Yeah.
I hope not, but you just never know.
Yeah, but I imagine at the end of the day, I mean, you hope that doesn't happen, but you got to be proud of yourself for speaking out. I mean, that's, like I said, I think that's in and of itself something people appreciate, is when you speak your mind. It's I say this all the time with some other fighters that have spoken. I say, listen, I know the UFC is the biggest organization. They're not the evil empire. You know what I mean? So not everything they do is bad by any stretch of the imagination. But if you have a legit grief or a legit gripe with them, I think you should be able to speak out about that. And I think people appreciate that when you do. It doesn't have to be UFC. Bellator, World Series of Fighting, or Pro Fighting League, whatever it's called now, like any of those, like, you should be able to speak your mind without, and people, I think, appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think, because I'm on a 3-fight win streak. I won my fight. I got I was given a platform to speak my mind. I mean, like I said, it just kind of came out. The reason why everybody's talking about it, like I'm talking about it even more now, is because, it got a lot of buzz. But I actually, the people that even helped me to, want to speak out were, people like Demetrius Johnson. Like he just spoke out, and even James Vick. I fought on the same card as him in Houston, and then I watched his last fight, which was the Holloway Aldo on the Holloway Aldo card. And after his fight, he spoke out. He said, "Look, I'm 7-1 in the UFC. I've just won my last 7 fights." He's like, "What?" And I don't remember how many of them were by finish, but a lot of them were. He's like, "What do I have to do to get some love?" He's like, "I see the UFC flying out guys who've got like 2 fights and doing this and that for them and setting them up and bringing them here and there." He's like, he's like, "What do I have to do to get that kind of love?" And then it was nice to see him, as he was a special guest at, UFC Oklahoma, and, he spoke out and he got a little love back. So maybe, I'm hoping that maybe the same thing can happen for me as well. And, maybe, they don't realize that because not every fighter wants to be put out. Not every fighter wants to be put out like that. Some fighters. Sorry, can you hear me? I'm getting another call.
I can.
Okay. Some fighters just want to sit back and collect their money. Some fighters don't care about promotion, the PR push, or any of that. But then some of us do, and maybe they think that most of us don't. Maybe they think most of us only care about the money. But that's stupid, because if people really want to build their brand and want to think about making money outside of the UFC, especially since we can't have, sponsors anymore. I'm thinking about my career after I'm done fighting. I can't fight forever. I'm not in my 20s anymore. I want to be set for and I think that's what has been getting me emotional is I've spent the last, oh gosh, I'm going to cry again. I've spent the last few years, especially when I, wasn't doing as good as I am now, I was thinking, wow, this is what I've done my whole life. And I thought that, I always thought opportunities would open up, and they have. But when I got the call to be in the UFC, I really thought things were going to change for me. And I really thought that I, would get, the exposure that I needed and the push that I needed so that I would be able to do some things. For when I'm done fighting, you know, I thought that maybe, because the exposure that you do get and the opportunities you do get from being a fighter are what, look at Shaquille O'Neal. He doesn't freaking fight anymore. You see him on these deodorant commercials and, he's still set. He's still in a good spot. I want to be in a good spot. I want my skills to be showcased as much as they possibly can. I want as much eyes to be on me so that I can feel good about my future.
Yeah. Well, and I know that before you were in the UFC, you spent a lot of years really building your brand. You were kind of one of the first fighters to really use social media to do that and doing some other things to do that. And I imagine as a fighter, you're kind of thinking, okay, I've done all this work to get to this point, along with my fights, obviously. I've done all this, get to the UFC. UFC is the biggest brand in the world. UFC is the biggest organization in the world, and it's just going to multiply. It's just going to, kind of, they're going to take what I've already built, and they're going to, kind of, put a little extra push behind it. It's going to be amazing. And then when it doesn't happen, I imagine it is a little disheartening when you're not really getting what you feel like you should be getting.
Yeah, and not only that, but when I still continue to build my brand and to do things on my own. When I'm in Muscle and Fitness magazine, I'm running an American Ninja Warrior. I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and the UFC doesn't get behind it, and they still it takes nothing to repost. It's actually I'm doing their work for them. You're welcome, PR team. I'm doing your job. And to get no love for it, it makes no sense. And you need, I have the UFC machine. It's like right there in front of me, but they won't get behind me. And it would be nice, because I've worked so hard before, before the Ultimate Fighter, before there was like women in the UFC. I was one of the most, known female fighters, and I did that on my own. And now, and it does feel like it. What was it all for? Because now I got to the biggest stage, and people are overshadowing me, not because I feel like they're more marketable than me, or because, they're really, they have a better personality than me, or they're prettier, or they're this, or they're that, or they're a better fighter. It's because the UFC gets behind them. And the UFC, why they choose to get behind certain people, actually, sometimes it doesn't make sense,
Yeah. Yeah. So now, with that said, you spoke on, like I said, I think it's an important subject, an important thing that we're talking about this. But obviously, coming off that win, very impressively. Hopefully, the PR machine kind of gets behind you now, especially leading into your next fight. So, kind of leading that conversation in that direction, Felice. Like, what do you feel like is next for you? Because a lot of people on Sunday night, we're suggesting, once again, let's throw out that Paige Van Zandt rematch, something I know you've wanted. You've told me numerous times you wanted. Now, I said to somebody else, I said, I think Felice is past that, not because I don't want you to get revenge. I just feel like in ranking-wise, you're higher than that now. But you tell me, what would be the perfect world for you next, beyond, hopefully, the UFC putting some push behind you, as you get booked into your fight, as you're going for 4 wins in a row?
I had talked about the Paige Van Zandt fight. It's not like I wouldn't want that for my own personal reasons, but I do feel like I surpassed her. I've gone on a 3-fight win streak and just dominated and showed that, hey, that fight obviously was a fluke. I don't necessarily need it. It's not that I wouldn't want it. But Michelle Waterson beat her. She's ranked number 7. Why not take out Michelle Waterson? And that's a fight that I wanted, since Fight Girls. And that's the fight that I had been booked for before I fought Alexa Grasso, and then they took it away from me. So that would be a great fight for me. But at this point, too, I've done well with them just putting people in front of me. And pretty much, I think, thinking that they were going to beat me. And I just did what I do. I'm a fighter. Like, fighters just, they step up and they fight. So that's why people are like, oh, you should, who do you want to fight? Does it really matter? Because at the end of the day, it really isn't my choice. I didn't want to fight Justine. I turned that fight down before Alexa Grasso because I was afraid that she wasn't going to make weight. I was like, I don't want that fight. I don't think she's going to make weight, blah, blah, blah. And I actually turned it down. And then who do they give me after I beat Alexa Grasso? Who's the one person that they give me? Justine Kish. Really? Is that the fight you really want? Is that the one that makes the most sense right now? And so I almost felt like it was like this vendetta against me. And I was like, well, I'm not gonna be a little bitch, and I'm not gonna not take a fight because I think she might not make weight. I'm like, hopefully she does, and also I'm gonna face, I'm gonna be a fighter. I'm gonna step up. I'm gonna face my fears, and I'm gonna fight this scary ass girl that I actually am really scared of fighting. And then I'm gonna believe in myself and hope I come out on top, and I did. And that in itself gives me a whole lot of confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I do really like the matchup with Michelle Waterson. It's funny, I was actually thinking that after the fight because I know rankings are ultimately just numbers next to a name, and judging by some of the matchups that have been made, rankings clearly don't really matter. But I think that is a fun fight, and I think, Michelle, coming off the fight with Rose Namajunas and obviously the win over Paige, I think that would be a really fun fight and a big fight as well. And I would hope that the UFC would not only make that fight, but really promote it. I mean, listen, I know, obviously you're on a 3-fight win streak. Michelle has proven to be a very, very good fighter. I think that would be a really fun fight. So I'd like to see that one come together. And like I said, it was nothing against Paige when I said that. I just felt like where you were at after 3 wins in a row and where she's been at, after a couple losses, it just kind of felt like that seemed a little bit of uneven matchmaking to me. But I think you and Michelle makes a lot of sense.
Well, I think, let's be honest, Paige wouldn't want to fight me. She'd be lucky if she didn't have to fight me. But the Michelle fight makes more sense. So we'll see what happens. And of course it's going to be marketed because I would be fighting Michelle. So, or maybe Michelle will be marketed. I don't know.
Well, I think you raised some very interesting points, and I think it's stuff that needs to be said. And I think it's an important subject because, like I said, there are certain things like when some fighters, when Tyron Woodley brought up racism, and when you bring up like sexist tendencies towards promotion, things like that. No one really wants to talk about that, but we got to be honest; those things happen, and it's not just in the UFC. I mean, I'm quite sure it happens in other sports as well. We're kind of in the vacuum of mixed martial arts, but it happens. I mean, listen, there's other fighters who have been promoted. When you look at them, like, wow, she's a really pretty girl, but why exactly is she fighting in a main card? Like, I've seen it before. It's not just the UFC that does it. So I think it's an important subject that we absolutely need to address because at the end of the day, this is a fight business. You're supposed to be able to go out there and fight and win, and that's what that's what's most important. It's about who wins the fights.
Right, and people aren't stupid too. A lot of times you can tell if somebody is a skilled, male or female, you can tell if somebody is a skilled fighter. You see a lot of these female fighters who are, sometimes you're like, wow, they look like they fight like a guy. Like, you can't tell that much of a difference, and it's because they're a good fighter. And then there's some fighters you're like, the technique isn't there, like, they don't seem to have any kind of strength, and you kind of sit back and you know better. You're like, this fight actually doesn't deserve to be on the main card.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Felice, I always appreciate the time. I always appreciate the honesty, and I hope that the marketing powers that be get behind you. I think you deserve it, especially after the performances you've had recently. The win over Justine Kish was very, very impressive, and I think you're only getting better. So I look forward to when you fight again. I know you're literally days removed from the fight. I mean, how are you feeling? Do you hope to fight again this year, I assume?
I want to enjoy my summer, but I would be aiming towards like December.
Okay. I think that's a good timeline. There's always big cards in December.
Well, I mean, around that, sometime around then is what I would be looking for, but I don't have my sights set on anything. My main priority right now is, it took me so long, I don't want to overstress my body like I had, I don't want to get back to that point. So I need the balance. I need my time to enjoy myself and to be a human being, and what a better time than summer.
Exactly.
I want to enjoy my life a little bit so that when I go into camp, I feel like, all right, I'm ready to do this. I'm ready to be back.
Yeah, soak in some sun. Get some of that vitamin D. Everyone needs a little bit of that.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Felice, it is always a pleasure. I appreciate the time. Thank you for that. And obviously, again, congratulations on an amazing win. I'm sure we'll speak soon, and thank you again for taking the time.
Awesome. Thanks, Damon.
All right, talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.